This is all but easy. Panikkar assures us, for only those persons who have existentially crossed the borders of at least two cultures and are home in either shall be able first to understand and then to translate. The essay's concluding remarks return to the political introduction and take up the thesis of the impossible independent discipline of comparative philosophy. That discipline is now said to aim at comparing the final myths on which certain cultures have constructed their worlds, with the major appendix that this includes the West and its myths. It is thus that comparative philosophy is said not to demythologize, but to transmythicize. Panikkar is issuing a fundamental criticism not only of philosophy, but also of comparative philosophy as hitherto practiced, as a super philosophy of the modern Western critical mind, passing judgment on everything under the sun, uncritical of its own assumptions and of what philosophy is. End of quote. Comparative philosophy, qua imperative philosophy, therefore, is not independent super philosophy, not passing judgment, but contrasting everything and learning from everywhere, and always critical of its own assumptions and of what philosophy is. In fact, it is said to be radically critical of its own enterprise. This is, as you would expect, the entry point for my dialogue with Panikkar, and I shall now proceed to my criticism of his essay and his take on comparative philosophy. Put in admittedly provocative terms, Panikkar's argument is pitting a more than vague imperative philosophy against caricatures of other types of comparative philosophy. He thus fails to live up to his own admonition of taking other philosophical views seriously. Even if for the sake of controversy, daring in putting the matter so provocatively, I owe you more careful and ample explanation and hopefully what amounts to be a good case on my side. My criticism is twofold, one on the level of argumentation and one on the level of the imperatives of imperative philosophy measured against its own assumptions. First is some criticism of how Panikkar argues his case. Consider how in the essay 5 types of contemporary comparative philosophy are distinguished and discussed, all eventually failing to constitute a truly independent comparative philosophy, while one, imperative philosophy, still emerges at the end as the recommendable option. What is the exact relation between the failure of all 5 types and the positive assessment of one of them? What criteria are used to decide on failure and recommendation? Quite obviously, that which makes all 5 types fail cannot be that which justifies the recommendation of imperative philosophy. Otherwise, imperative philosophy will turn out to be recommended and considered a failure for the very same reason. Not to be mistaken, the problem would not be the apparent contradiction. At least it would not be a problem for Panikkar, who rejects the logical law of non-contradiction. The problem would rather be that it would be left entirely unclear why not all 5 types, but only imperative philosophy, were allowed the benefit of contradiction. In my view, however, there are clearly different criteria at work when Panikkar determines failure and embraces recommendation. This brings up at least 2 possible constellations for further inquiry, if we keep within the 5 offered types and disregard the important question whether there are other types of comparative philosophy who have stronger candidates for types than those listed by Panikkar. The first constellation regards criteria for failure. Does Panikkar offer reasons of failure for each other type of comparative philosophy beyond the commonly shared failure of not constituting a truly independent comparative philosophy? The second constellation regards criteria for recommendation. Are Panikkar's reasons for recommending imperative philosophy based on criteria that are not applicable to the other types of comparative philosophy, or if applicable, do they yield opposite answers